In a faraway realm, nestled among misty mountains and lush forests, there lived a duke of remarkable intellect, courage, and beauty. Despite his privileged life and the admiration of all who crossed his path, the young duke grew restless. The luxury and ease of palace life bored him, and he longed for a change. As his 18th birthday approached, the duke made a declaration to his father, the Baron. He would marry only the most beautiful woman in the world. The Baron, eager to please his son and secure a future for the realm, agreed to the duke's condition. He decided to host a grand ball, inviting every noblewoman of exceptional beauty from across the kingdom and beyond. The palace was soon abuzz with preparations for the grand event. Dresses were sewn from the finest silks, and decorations adorned every hall. Word of the duke's search spread quickly, and families from every corner prepared their daughters for a chance to win his favor. On the night of the ball, the palace glowed with golden light. Guests poured into the grand hall, where sparkling chandeliers hung like stars. The duke stood at the center of the room, dressed in regal attire. His eyes scanned the hall, searching for a face that might capture his heart. One by one, he danced with the women, listening to their soft voices and gazing into their eyes. Yet none of them stirred anything within him. The duke sighed, frustration beginning to gnaw at his heart. As he moved to leave the dance floor, he overheard a heated conversation nearby. "Your Grace," spoke Lady Miriam, a sharp-eyed, middle-aged noblewoman, whose daughter had just been dismissed by the duke. She stepped forward, her voice laced with anger. "Do you not see? My daughter is the fairest in all the land. How could you not choose her?" The duke turned, his expression stern yet composed. "My lady," he replied, his voice calm, "your daughter is indeed beautiful, but beauty is not merely in the face. I seek the most enchanting woman in every sense." Lady Miriam's eyes darkened as she clenched her fists. "You will regret this, my lord," she hissed, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "If you cannot recognize true beauty, then perhaps you deserve to seek the impossible." Before the duke could respond, she raised her hands, and a chill ran through the air. Those closest to them gasped and stepped back. The duke's eyes widened as Lady Miriam's face twisted with rage. "From now on," she chanted, her voice echoing through the hall, "you shall seek not beauty, but the opposite. You will wander the earth until you find the ugliest woman alive, or else—" She paused, a wicked grin forming on her lips. "Or else you will turn to stone, piece by piece, until there is nothing left of you." The duke felt a cold shiver run through his body. He looked down at his hands and gasped. His fingertips had already started to turn gray, hardening into rough stone. The Baron, who had been watching from the side, rushed forward. "What have you done? Witch?" he roared, his eyes blazing with fury. Lady Miriam laughed, a sound that echoed through the hall like a sinister bell. "I have given your son a new quest," she replied smoothly. "He must now seek the ugliest woman, or he shall remain a statue forever. It is the price of his arrogance." The duke, though stunned, straightened his back. "I will break this curse," he declared, his voice firm, "and I will find a woman whose true beauty lies beyond appearance." With that, Lady Miriam vanished in a swirl of mist, leaving the hall in a stunned silence. The guests, who had witnessed the scene, began to murmur among themselves, fear and curiosity etched on their faces. The Baron approached his son, worry deep in his eyes. "My son," he began cautiously, "are you certain of this quest? Perhaps we can find another way." The duke shook his head. "No, father. I set these conditions myself, and now I must see it through. I will find the woman who can break this curse." He glanced down at his hand, now half encased in stone. "Time is not on my side, but I will not give up." And so, with a new purpose and a heart weighed by uncertainty, the duke began his quest to seek the impossible, the ugliest woman in the world. The duke's quest had begun. With a heavy heart and a sense of urgency, he set off from the palace, traveling across the kingdom and beyond. Day after day, he rode through towns and villages, searching for the woman who could end his curse. However, everywhere he went, he found kindness, grace, and inner beauty in those whom others might call plain or unattractive. He visited bustling markets, quiet hamlets, and the remote hillsides of the realm. In every village, people had heard of his quest and eagerly presented their daughters. Though some of the women were not conventionally beautiful, none could be described as truly ugly. Their eyes sparkled with warmth, their hearts full of kindness. Despite this, the curse's effects grew stronger. The Duke's fingers, once only partially turned to stone, now extended to his wrist, reminding him of the ticking clock. As his search continued, the Duke began to despair. Late one evening, after weeks of fruitless searching, he found himself in a small inn on the edge of the kingdom. The room was dimly lit, with only the crackling fire in the hearth offering any warmth. "You've been looking quite troubled, young master," said the innkeeper, a stout and wise old man. He approached the Duke, carrying a wooden mug of steaming broth. "Seems to me that you're chasing something that ain't meant to be found." The Duke sighed, looking at his now stone-covered arms. "You may be right," he replied quietly, "but I have no choice. If I do not find the woman, I will turn to stone entirely. I must break this curse." The innkeeper nodded slowly, setting the mug down on the table. "A curse, you say? Sounds like magic's involved. They say that when magic and pride meet, trouble often follows. Perhaps it's not the appearance you should be searching for, but something else. What else could there be?" The Duke muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. "I have been told to seek the ugliest woman in the world. How can I possibly find such a person, when every woman I meet shows beauty of some kind?" He looked down at his hands, clenched into fists. "And every day I lose more of myself to this stone." "Maybe," the innkeeper said thoughtfully, "ugliness ain't just about how someone looks. Sometimes true ugliness lies in the heart, not the face. And sometimes those with kind hearts wear faces the world might not easily love." He paused, glancing at the Duke. "Have you tried looking in places no one else dares to go?" The Duke frowned, pondering the old man's words. "What do you mean?" "There's a place far to the north," the innkeeper explained. "A forested land where few venture. They say that deep in those woods lies a village where the most unfortunate souls dwell. If your curse leads you to seek the ugliest, perhaps that's where you'll find your answer." The Duke nodded slowly, hope kindling in his chest. "Then that is where I must go," he said resolutely, "to the northern woods." The next morning, he set out for the forested north, guided by the innkeeper's cryptic advice. After many days of travel through treacherous paths and dense forests, he finally arrived at a small, secluded village shrouded in mist. The air was cold, and the trees stood tall and silent like ancient guardians. As the Duke entered the village square, he saw two women standing by a well. One was laughing, her face bright and cheerful despite her plain features. Her eyes shone with kindness and joy, her movements light as if unburdened by the world's troubles. Beside her stood another woman, who contrasted sharply with the first. This second woman had a stern, grim expression, her lips thin and pressed tightly together, as if she had never smiled. Her eyes, cold and calculating, darted towards the Duke, sizing him up. "Who are you?" the grim woman demanded, her voice harsh. "And what do you seek in our village?" The Duke dismounted his horse and approached them cautiously. "I am a traveler, on a quest," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "I seek a woman who others would consider the ugliest." The grim woman's eyes narrowed as she stepped forward. "And what makes you think you will find such a person here?" she sneered. "Do you not see that beauty is a matter of the heart?" The Duke glanced at the cheerful woman beside her. Despite her plain appearance, she radiated warmth and kindness, unlike the grim woman who seemed to exude bitterness. "Perhaps beauty is indeed of the heart," the Duke replied, his gaze lingering on the cheerful woman. "And ugliness, too, may come from within." The grim woman huffed, turning away. "You will find no help here," she snapped. "Go back to where you came from." With that, she stormed off, leaving the Duke standing with the cheerful woman. The cheerful woman smiled at the Duke. "You seem troubled," she said softly. "Your journey has not been an easy one, I can tell." "You are right," the Duke admitted. "I seek to break a curse, but I am beginning to believe that I have been searching for the wrong thing all along." The woman nodded. "Perhaps," she replied, "the one you seek is not defined by her face, but by what lies in her soul. The heart can hold more beauty or more ugliness than any face ever could. For the first time in weeks, the Duke felt a glimmer of hope. He realized that his journey might not be about finding the ugliest woman, but understanding the nature of beauty and ugliness itself. With this new understanding, he continued his quest, not knowing that his encounter with these two women would soon lead to an unexpected turn in his story. The Duke remained in the northern village, contemplating the words of the cheerful woman and the grim one. He felt that his quest was nearing a turning point, but uncertainty still lingered in his heart. The stone continued to creep up his arms, serving as a constant reminder that time was running out. He needed answers, and soon. Word of the Duke's presence spread quickly through the village, reaching the ears of the grim woman's mother, a cunning and ambitious woman named Lady Drava. In her youth, Lady Drava had been a beauty, but bitterness and envy had since twisted her heart. She had always wished for her daughter, Alina, to be admired and envied. However, the cheerful woman in the village, who was known as Maren, effortlessly outshined Alina with her kindness and joy. Seeing an opportunity to fulfill her desires, Lady Drava sought out the village sorceress, an ancient woman known for her dark and twisted magic. As Lady Drava approached the sorceress's small, dimly lit cottage, she felt a sense of foreboding. The sorceress, seated by a bubbling cauldron, turned her sharp eyes towards Lady Drava. "What brings you here, my lady?" she croaked, her voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. Lady Drava hesitated, then spoke, determination burning in her eyes. "I wish to make my daughter, Alina, the most beautiful woman in the world," she said. "And that insipid girl, Maren, she should be made into a hideous monster. Only then will my daughter be the one the Duke chooses." The sorceress chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down Lady Drava's spine. "You wish to use magic to twist beauty and ugliness, do you?" she mused. "Very well. I can grant your wish, but remember, all magic comes with a price." Lady Drava clenched her fists, ignoring the sorceress's warning. "Do it," she demanded. "Give my daughter what she deserves." The sorceress grinned wickedly and began chanting, stirring her cauldron with a gnarled staff. A thick, green mist filled the room as she cast her spell, her voice rising and falling like the howls of the wind. Lady Drava watched in both fear and anticipation as the sorceress worked her dark magic. In the village, as the spell took hold, Maren's appearance began to change. Her radiant smile twisted into a grimace, her skin grew rough and discolored, and her eyes, once bright and kind, now appeared sunken and tired. The villagers gasped and stepped back in horror. Meanwhile, Alena was transformed into a woman of dazzling beauty. Her previously plain features became flawless, her eyes now glistening with a cold, calculated light. When the spell was complete, Lady Drava hurried to Alina, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. Now she whispered to her daughter, "The Duke will have no choice but to choose you." Alina, now aware of her newfound beauty, smirked. "Let's see how he resists me now," she replied confidently. The next day, the Duke arrived at the village square, having heard whispers of a woman transformed into a monster overnight. As he approached, he saw the villagers gathered in a circle. In the center, he spotted Maren, now appearing hideous and forlorn. Standing beside her was Alina, radiating beauty yet with an expression of smugness on her face. The Duke approached slowly, his heart heavy with sorrow as he looked at Maren. He remembered her kind smile and warm eyes, now lost beneath the grim mask of the curse. He then turned to Alina, who met his gaze with a confident, almost predatory look. "Greetings, Your Grace," Alina said, her voice silky but devoid of warmth. "I hear you seek a woman to end your curse." The Duke studied her carefully, feeling a chill run down his spine. "I do," he replied, "but I seek not just any woman. I seek the one whose true nature matches her outward form." "Then surely you have found her," Lady Drava interjected, stepping forward with a sly smile. "My daughter is now the fairest in all the land. She is the one you seek." Maren, still transformed into a monstrous figure, stood silently, her head bowed. The Duke approached her and knelt down, lifting her chin to meet his gaze. In her eyes, he saw the same kindness and sorrow he had seen before, untouched by the hideous mask she now wore. "Who did this to you?" he asked gently. It was not by my choice, your grace, Marin replied, her voice trembling yet sincere. A spell was cast upon me, as another wished to claim the beauty they thought I did not deserve. The Duke's heart ached at her words. He turned to face Alina and Lady Drava, his eyes filled with anger. True ugliness lies not in one's face, but in one's actions and heart, he said sternly. And here, I see the heart of a monster not in this woman before me, but in those who sought to use magic to manipulate fate. Lady Drava's face contorted with rage. You dare speak to us this way? She hissed. My daughter is now the most beautiful. You have no choice but to choose her. The Duke stood tall, his eyes piercing into Lady Drava's. Beauty without kindness is hollow, he declared, and I will not be swayed by empty appearances. Alina, realizing that her newfound beauty could not deceive the Duke, faltered. But I am beautiful now, she stammered, confusion and fear clouding her once confident demeanor. Does that not make me worthy? No, the Duke replied firmly. What makes one worthy is not the beauty that magic bestows, but the goodness that shines from within. And it is Marin, not you, who possesses that true beauty. As the Duke's words echoed through the village square, the ground began to tremble. The sorceress's spell wavered, and in an instant, Marin's monstrous appearance faded, revealing her original form. The villagers gasped in awe as they beheld her, not as a hideous creature, but as the kind and joyful woman they had known. Alina, however, remained unchanged. Though still beautiful on the outside, the coldness in her eyes and the bitterness in her heart were laid bare for all to see. With the sorceress's spell broken, Marin returned to her true self, standing radiant before the Duke and the villagers. Her kindness and inner warmth now shone through, unmarred by the dark magic that had tried to twist her form. The Duke looked at her, his heart swelling with a sense of peace he hadn't felt since beginning his arduous quest. Lady Drava and Alina, however, stood paralyzed with shock. Alina's newfound beauty could not mask the coldness and bitterness in her eyes, which now lay fully revealed before the villagers. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as they recognized the stark contrast between the two women. It was clear who possessed true beauty, and who was consumed by ugliness of the heart. The Duke approached Marin, bowing his head slightly as he spoke, his voice filled with both respect and hope. Marin, he began softly, in my travels, I sought the one who could break my curse. I believed the answer lay in finding ugliness, but now I see that true beauty comes from within. Marin, still taken aback by the events, managed a gentle smile. Your Grace, she replied, her voice calm yet filled with emotion. You have been searching for something that could only be seen with the heart, not the eyes. I, too, have learned much about the nature of beauty and courage during this time. The Duke took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. Then, Marin, he continued, will you join me as my bride? Not because of what you look like, but because of the goodness and strength that reside within you. For a moment, silence fell over the village square. Marin's eyes softened, and she felt tears well up as she nodded. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. Yes, I will. The villagers erupted into cheers, their joy echoing through the air. The Duke, now filled with a sense of contentment and relief, reached out and gently took Marin's hand. At that very instant, he felt a surge of warmth spread through his body. He glanced down at his arms, and to his amazement, the stone encasing them began to crack and crumble away, revealing his normal flesh beneath. Marin gasped, her eyes widening in awe. The curse? It's lifting, she exclaimed, gripping the Duke's hand tightly. Lady Drava, witnessing the scene, shrieked in disbelief. No, this cannot be, she cried, her face contorting with rage and despair. My daughter was meant to be the chosen one. The Duke turned to Lady Drava, his expression stern yet composed. Your ambitions have blinded you to the truth, he said. Beauty is not something that can be forced or stolen. It comes from one's actions, one's heart. Marin has proven herself worthy not because of her looks, but because of her spirit. Alina, who had been standing in stunned silence, suddenly broke down, tears streaming down her face. I thought beauty would make me happy, she sobbed. But it's only brought me misery. I don't know who I am anymore. Maren, despite all that had been done to her, stepped forward, her eyes full of compassion. "Alina," she said softly, "it's not too late to change. True beauty comes from kindness and love, not from what others see on the outside. You can still find your own happiness if you let go of your bitterness." Alina looked up at Maren, her eyes filled with confusion and sorrow. "But how do I even begin?" she whispered. "By being honest with yourself and those around you," Maren replied gently. "By learning to see the goodness in others and in yourself. It's not an easy path, but it is a worthy one." Alina nodded, wiping away her tears. Lady Drava, however, could not accept what had transpired. She turned and fled from the square, vanishing into the forest, her ambitions shattered by the reality of her own actions. As the days passed, preparations for the wedding began. The village was filled with an air of excitement, and people from near and far arrived to witness the union of the Duke and Maren. The once gloomy northern village now thrived with joy and hope, its dark woods giving way to light as if in celebration of the love that had blossomed there. On the day of the wedding, the village square was transformed into a place of beauty. Flowers adorned every surface, and the sun shone brightly in the sky. The villagers gathered in anticipation as the Duke stood at the front, dressed in elegant attire, his gaze fixed on the path where his bride would soon appear. Finally, Maren stepped forward, her simple yet graceful dress flowing around her as she walked. Her face glowed with happiness, and her eyes sparkled as she looked at the Duke. She approached him, and they both smiled, the love between them evident to all who watched. As the ceremony began, the Duke took Maren's hands in his and spoke. "Maren," he said, his voice steady and full of emotion, "from the moment I'd met you, I felt a light within you that no darkness could ever dim. You have shown me the true meaning of beauty and courage. Today, I vow to stand by you, to cherish you, and to love you with all my heart." Maren's eyes glistened with tears of joy as she replied, "And I, too, vow to stand by your side," she said, her voice warm and filled with sincerity. "You have taught me that strength and goodness lie not in what we appear to be, but in what we do and who we choose to become. Together, we will create a life of love and kindness." With those words, they sealed their vows, and the village erupted into applause and cheers. As they kissed, a burst of light enveloped them, filling the square with warmth and joy. The Duke's curse was completely broken, not just by the choice of a bride, but by the realization that true beauty comes from within. The festivities that followed were filled with laughter, music, and dance. Even Alina, who had begun her journey towards change, joined the celebration, watching from the side with a soft smile on her face. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of peace, understanding that her path to true beauty had only just begun. And so, the Duke and Maren began their new life together, their love transforming the realm. Under their rule, the kingdom prospered, filled with hope, joy, and kindness. The tale of their wedding spread far and wide, reminding all that true beauty and courage come not from outward appearances, but from the heart's capacity for love and goodness. Months passed since the grand wedding of the Duke and Maren, and the kingdom had changed for the better. Their union brought a new era of prosperity and kindness to the land, transforming it from a place of selfishness and envy into one of generosity and hope. The once grim northern village became a lively hub of activity and joy, as people traveled from all corners of the realm to witness the happiness that had blossomed there. The Duke and Maren spent their days traveling through the kingdom, meeting their people, and learning of their joys and struggles. They listened to their subjects' concerns and worked together to bring solutions that fostered peace and prosperity. The Duke's leadership was wise and just, while Maren's warmth and compassion touched everyone she met. However, shadows still lingered on the edges of this newfound happiness. Lady Drava, now living in isolation after her failed schemes, watched from the depths of the forest. Her heart festered with bitterness and envy as she witnessed the joy that had grown in the kingdom without her. Meanwhile, the sorceress, bound by her own dark magic, remained a silent observer, transformed into a spider that lurked in the shadows, biding her time. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the Duke and Maren sat in the grand hall of their castle, discussing the future. The room was filled with a warm glow from the crackling fireplace, casting long shadows on the walls. Our people are thriving, Marin said, her voice filled with quiet pride. It brings me joy to see the villages coming alive, filled with laughter and hope. The Duke nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. Yes, he agreed, but I fear that there are still remnants of darkness in our land. Not all wounds have healed. He paused, looking at Marin with concern. What of Elena? Have you heard from her? Marin sighed, her eyes reflecting a mix of sadness and hope. She is trying, she replied. I visited her not long ago. She lives quietly now, away from her mother's influence. It is not an easy path she has chosen, but I believe she has the strength to change. The Duke took Marin's hand in his. Your faith in others is one of the things I admire most about you, he said gently. You see the light in people, even when they cannot see it in themselves. Just then, a knock on the door interrupted their conversation. One of the royal guards entered, bowing respectfully. Your Grace, my lady, he said, his tone serious. A visitor has arrived. It's Elena. She wishes to speak with you. Marin exchanged a glance with the Duke before standing. Let her in, she said calmly. The guard nodded and left the room. A few moments later, Elena entered, her posture tense and her face etched with uncertainty. Your Graces, she began, her voice quivering slightly. I know I have no right to ask for your time after everything I've done, but I wanted to speak with you. The Duke nodded. You may speak, Elena, he replied, his tone neutral but not unkind. Elena took a deep breath, her eyes downcast. I've been reflecting on my actions, on the pain I caused, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was driven by envy and the desire for beauty, but it brought me nothing but emptiness. She looked up at them, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I want to change. I want to find my own path to happiness, one that isn't built on someone else's suffering. Marin's eyes softened as she stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on Elena's shoulder. The path to redemption is not an easy one, but the fact that you seek it shows great courage, she said kindly. You cannot erase the past, but you can choose how to live from this day forward. Elena nodded, swallowing hard. I know, she replied, and I wish to make amends, to help in any way I can. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to earn the trust of those I've wronged. The Duke, observing the exchange, crossed his arms thoughtfully. The kingdom has a place for those who are willing to work for its prosperity, he said. If you truly wish to change, you will need to prove it through your actions. Words are a beginning, but deeds will show your sincerity. Elena straightened, a glimmer of determination in her eyes. I understand, she said. I will do whatever it takes. From that day on, Elena worked tirelessly to make amends. She assisted in rebuilding the villages and caring for the sick and poor. Slowly, the people began to see a new side of her, one that was earnest and willing to learn. Marin often visited her, offering guidance and support, while the Duke kept a watchful eye, ready to lend his aid if needed. Meanwhile, Lady Drava, isolated in her forest dwelling, fumed at the sight of her daughter's transformation. Her bitterness grew, feeding on the darkness within her heart. But without her influence, the kingdom flourished under the rule of the Duke and Marin. One evening, as Marin and the Duke stood on the castle balcony, looking out over the moonlit kingdom, Marin spoke softly. Do you think Elena will find her own happiness? The Duke turned to her, his eyes reflecting the light of the stars. I believe she can, he replied. She has already come so far. It takes time and effort to change, but with the right guidance, even those who once walked in darkness can find the light. Marin smiled, leaning against him as they watched the kingdom together. You've taught me that, you know, she said, that even in the darkest places, there is always hope for redemption. As they stood there, hand in hand, a warm breeze swept through the air, carrying with it the sounds of laughter and song from the villages below. The kingdom had become a place where joy could flourish, not because of outward appearances, but because of the hearts of those who lived there. In time, the tale of the Duke and Marin became legend, a story passed down through generations. It was said that their love brought peace to the land, and their compassion transformed even the hardest of hearts. And as for the sorceress who had once reveled in her dark magic, she remained a shadow in the forest, powerless and forgotten, a reminder of a past that no longer held sway over the lives of the people. Thus, the kingdom lived on, its prosperity built on the foundations of love, kindness, and the belief that even the most wayward soul could find its way back to the light. And so, the Duke and Maureen ruled with wisdom and grace, their story a testament to the power of true beauty and the courage to choose goodness, no matter how difficult the path may be.